Hello, everybody. How you doing today? This is Rich Harshaw with Monopolize Your Marketplace, and we are here for the Innovation Hour call, and we're going to tackle the tricky topic of creativity. It's something that comes up all the time in marketing. Should marketing and advertising be more creative? Is it more like a science? And the reality is, it really can be both. It really can be both. And what I want to do is dive into some of the creative side of things. If you follow the MYM methodology, you're a little bit more acquainted with the scientific side of things, because my belief is that if you follow a set of principles that you can get, generally speaking, the right answer, so to speak, when you put your marketing out there, when you work through that process. But there's also a need for creativity, not just in the creation of ads and marketing pieces itself, but also in the innovation of your company coming up with ideas. Now, one of the things that we've done quite a bit on these calls, we've gone through different innovation formulas and so forth, trying to give you ideas and impetus to think of ideas and help you be creative. But today's topic is a little bit more internalized in terms of not just where can I turn for good ideas, but where do good ideas come from in the first place so that you can then tap into them. So I'm going to cover some topics today that are probably a little bit less traditional and standard than you're used to hearing me talk about, and you're going to have to just kind of take my way of saying some of these things. Now, I've got an ad that's on the screen, and that ad we'll talk about a little bit later. But today, for the most part, this webinar and conference call is not going to be a slideshow. It's not going to be the typical kind where I go through a presentation. I'm just going to talk you through some concepts. You may want to take some notes, and there may be some things that you can take from this and utilize in your own situation. Okay, but this is going to take a little more effort and thought and so forth on your part. So I want to talk about the major ways to get creative ideas. And there's three major ways that I want to share with you. And we'll take a little time and focus on each of the three. So the three are, by way of introduction, inspiration, which is the concept that you can get an idea out of quote-unquote nowhere. Number two is deduction, which is the idea that you can get an idea from an existing idea. You can get an offshoot of an idea that becomes a new concept or a new idea. And the third one is what I call mismatching, which is what some people might call outside of the box thinking. It really has a lot more to do with seeing things as they really are and seeing through some of the things that we commonly don't look at or pay attention to simply because they're so routine. And so I'm going to challenge you to get a little bit deeper and get your shovel out and start digging a little bit. So the three things by way of preview are inspiration, deduction, and mismatching. Now, is this a comprehensive discussion on the topic of creativity? And the answer is no, it is not. This is a short presentation. We'll go through this for about 45 minutes or something like that. And you've probably got your own ideas, and there might be some things that you could add to this. There's probably some other things that I'm either haven't thought of or just have omitted for sake of time, but this is going to be a good foundation of this topic. And as we go through this, I'll give you some examples of each of the concepts so that you can piece them all together in your mind. So let me grab, okay, got my things I need here. So let's talk first about inspiration, and let's think about inspiration. When you think about the word inspiration, what does that mean to you? What's the common definition of inspiration? And you could think of inspiration in two different ways. One of the definitions that's very common is that you feel inspired to do something. You hear a motivational speech, or you watch a movie, or something happens that inspires you to go do something. It prompts you to action. And that's not the definition of inspiration that I'm talking about. That's a completely different concept. The definition I'm looking at, and the concept that we're thinking about here, is when you receive an idea that comes to you seemingly out of nowhere, and this is called inspiration. Okay, so can you make that distinction between the two definitions? They are similar, and they do have some relation to one another, but they are a little bit different. So we're going to be talking about that one where you get an idea. And I don't want to go into a whole lot of detail on this, but I think I'll have to go into a little bit of detail. But I want to give you an idea, and inspiration is something that is commonly talked about in a religious scenario, and I don't want to get necessarily religious on you, but I do want to point out to you that there is an ability to tap into. Now, you can call it God, you can call it infinite intelligence, you can call it whatever your preference to put on there. I prefer to call it God, but that's okay if you don't agree with that or you've got a different way of looking at it. The process works the same regardless of what words you put on it. And to understand this, I'm going to go to Napoleon Hill, and I'm going to give you a little bit of an idea of a concept where he talks about something called telepathy. And you might think, oh gosh, telepathy, that's a weird topic. We're talking about creativity, and now you're getting all freaky on me, and you're going to try to beam me up, Scotty, and stuff like that. Well, just kind of stick with me and go through this a little bit. I want you to understand this concept because I think it's imperative that you understand and believe this concept so that you can have confidence in your ability to tap into this storehouse of information that may be out there. So I guess what I'm really proposing is that if you get an idea that pops into your mind, if you are inspired, I guess what I'm really trying to say is it's possible that that idea emanated from somewhere, maybe another person, maybe from infinite intelligence or God or whatever you want to call it, but it is coming into your mind through a physical means. Now, this is an interesting concept, and it is part weird because Napoleon Hill is a little bit weird. And this concept actually comes not from Napoleon. He just reports it in his book called The Law of Success. It actually comes from Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor, of course, of the telephone. And because he invented the telephone, I said that actually the backwards, because of his interest in the things that allowed him to invent the telephone, he also had some other theories on the concept of vibration. Now, if you understand anything about vibration, if you look at television waves, radio waves, sound waves, light waves, here's what we know. Sound and light travels in waves, and it allows us to receive information into our senses, either through our natural senses or through mechanical devices like a television or a radio or a cell phone, in the case of Wi-Fi. It allows us to receive information that's being broadcast from somewhere else through what methodology? And the answer is waves. So listen to this just for a second. I'm going to read to you this from the book. I don't like to make a habit of reading books to you on these calls, but I think this is interesting, and he said it in a way that I don't think I could really paraphrase that well. So here's what Dr. Alexander Graham Bell said. This is a quote from him. Suppose you have the power to make an iron rod vibrate with any desired frequency in a dark room. At first, when vibrating slowly, its movement will be indicated only by one sense, that of touch. Remember, the room is dark, so you can't see it, but it's vibrating to the point that you could feel that iron rod vibrating. As soon as the vibrations increase, a low sound will emanate and will appeal to two senses. So now we've got sound coming from it, and we also can feel it. At about 32,000 vibrations to the second, the sound will become loud and shrill, but at 40,000 vibrations, it will be silent, and the movements of the rod will not be perceived by touch. Its movements will be perceived by no ordinary human sense. So in other words, it's moving so fast that you can't see it, you can't feel it. It's moving. You know what I'm talking about when something is vibrating so fast that you can't even really tell it's vibrating? That's what he's talking about here. All right, now stick with me. This seems a little bit strange, and why are we having this conversation? But stick with me, okay? Just take a couple minutes. From this point up to about 1.5 million vibrations per second, we have no sense that can appreciate any effect of the intervening vibrations. After that stage is reached, movement is indicated first by the sense of temperature, and then when the rod becomes red hot by the sense of sight. At 3 million vibrations per second, it sheds violet light. Above that, it sheds ultraviolet rays and other invisible radiation, some of which can be perceived by instruments and employed by us. So what he's saying is that depending on the frequency, that there is different senses that can perceive the vibrations. Some of them are by sight, some of them by feel, some of them by heat and temperature, others by sight, and then there's some that have light that is coming from it but can't be seen by human eyes and have to use some kind of instruments to see them. You can't see infrared, but you can see it through instruments. Now here's what he says, and here's where we're kind of getting to the point. Now it has occurred to me that there must be a great deal to be learned about the effect of those vibrations in the great gap where the ordinary human senses are unable to hear, see, or feel the movement. The power to send wireless messages by ether vibrations lies in the gap, but the gap is so great that it seems that there must be much more. You must make machines to supply new senses as the wireless instruments do. Now, think about when this was written in the early 1900s, roughly 100 years ago. They didn't have television. They barely had radio, or just was coming on board. Obviously, they didn't have wireless phones and things like that. And this entire concept, think about the concept. Go back even further in time. Go back to maybe the 17 or 16 or 1500s, something like that, or even further back in history. And the entire concept that there are invisible waves that are transmitting information like your simple radio in your car or into your television. Now that comes through satellites, which is even crazier. But this information is traveling on waves through the air, and think about how strange and weird that is. Now, I think he's trying to make a point that says, yeah, that's kind of weird, but if it's true that information can travel on waves, and things that would have seemed weird 300, 400, 500 years ago seem very commonplace to us now, as evidenced by this call that you're probably hearing over wireless internet, and I'm using a wireless phone to and a wireless internet connection to get it to you. Think about some of the things that maybe we still don't understand in terms of what's going on in these waves. That's all he's really trying to say. And here's what he says. Can it be said that when you think of that great gap, that there are not many forms of vibrations that may give us results as wonderful or even more wonderful than wireless waves? It seems to me that that in this gap lies the vibrations which we have assumed to be given off by our brains and nerve cells when we think. But then again, they may be higher up the scale, beyond vibrations that produce ultraviolet rays. And then Napoleon Hill has a note in here that he believes that it's the latter, higher waves. Now, here's what he's saying. Is it possible that your brain also creates brain waves that go out into this ether that can potentially then be picked up by other people? Here's what he says. Do we need a wire to carry these vibrations? Will they not pass through the ether without a wire, just as the wireless waves do? How will they be perceived by the recipient? Will he hear a series of signals, or will he find that another man's thoughts have entered into his brain? Will he hear a series of signals when he finds out that another man's thoughts have entered into his brain? Now, I'm not saying that this is true, and I'm not saying you have to believe me, and you might be kind of fed up with having to hear me talk about this for this long. But, you know, it's a free country. You can hang up, I guess. But I think it's interesting stuff. Is it possible that somebody else's thoughts could come into your brain? And my personal belief is, yeah, it is. And I think that these thoughts can emanate from other people. If you have a belief in higher power, perhaps they can emanate from some other realm. I don't really know, and I'm not going to speculate and say that's true, but I think it's in the realm of possibility. We may indulge, back to Alexander Graham Bell, in some speculation based on what we know about wireless waves, that we can recognize that a vast series of vibrations theoretically must exist. If the thought waves are similar to the wireless waves, they must pass from the brain and flow endlessly around the world and the universe. Our body and the skull and other solid obstacles would form no obstruction to their passage as they pass through the ether which surrounds the molecules of every substance, no matter how solid and dense. You ask if there would not be a constant interference and confusion if other people's thoughts were flowing through our brains and setting up thoughts that did not originate within ourselves. And then he poses this question: how do you know that other men's thoughts are not interfering with yours right now? I have noticed a good many phenomenon in mind disturbances that have never been able to explain. For instance, there's the inspiration or the discouragement that a speaker feels in addressing an audience. I've experienced it many times and never been able to define the physical causes of it. And then he says this: many recent scientific discoveries, in my opinion, Alexander Graham Bell, point to a day not far distant when perhaps men will read one another's thoughts, when thoughts will be conveyed directly from brain to brain without intervention of speech, writing, of any of the present known methods of communication. It is not unreasonable to look forward to a time when we shall see without eyes, hear without ears, and talk without tongues. Now, this is an interesting scenario, and I know it's starting to get a little bit out there, and I may have passed a limit of what you're comfortable talking about, but I do want you to think about that. And he goes into a concept that every mind is both a broadcasting and receiving station, and I want you to think about this. If you're broadcasting thoughts, that's one thing. It's fairly easy to broadcast something, but think about receiving, and this is where we're going to transition into the next part of this discussion about inspiration and the theory of vibration. In order to receive thoughts, like a simple radio tuner you have to be tuned in to the right frequency to receive those thoughts. And what I want to focus on now is the ability to tune in so that you can capture thoughts that may be out there. And all of this is under the larger topic of, well, how can we be creative? How can we get thoughts? And the hypothesis that I'm throwing out there is that there are thoughts out there that emanate from other people and or from the infinite storehouse of information, whether that be God or however you want to position that in your own mind. Excuse me. But it is out there, and it's possible, but it's only possible to receive it when somebody is, quote unquote, tuned in. Now, I was listening to an audiobook last week about, I think it's called The Power of Habit or something like that. I can't remember exactly what it's called. The Power of Habit, basically what it was. And the author was talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. And I'll give you some information, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But it was interesting. He was talking about the ability for people that go through that process of AA to find a higher power, to believe in it, and then to tune into it. And he talked about a particular individual that was known for being one of the world's best. I don't know what you call these guys. They're the guys that climb mountains and so forth, but they do it without any ropes, without any tethering, without any kind of safety gear. You know these kinds of guys that I'm talking about? And he said, and again, I'm just throwing some stuff out there at you. You can take it, filter through it, agree with it, disagree with it. I'm just going to throw it out there. But this is what he said in the book. He said that there's one particular guy that he knew was really, really good at this, and he was one of the world's best, and he could basically climb almost anything. And he said that when this guy started climbing, in the guy's description is that he would climb and he would start to feel at one with the wall or the structure that he was climbing. And he could feel every nuance of every little thing about every piece and part of that wall. And he said as he got into this zone, we're talking about the topic of tuning in, that he started to feel at one with the universe, and he felt like a part of the wall. Now, I know that's weird and freaky, but here's the part that's interesting. This is the part that I want to tell you. He said that frequently when he was on a wall or on a mountain or wherever he was climbing, he said when he would get hours into it and he would lose, this is going to sound wrong, he would lose consciousness, not that he would pass out, but he would go into more of a Zen-like what's the word there? Like a, oh, come on, what's the word I'm looking for there? I can't think of the word. Anyway, he would be, he would go into a different state of being, and he said, here's the interesting part. He said he could actually tune in actual radio frequencies and hear radio broadcasts. Now, I don't know if that's true, and it's kind of weird, but the point is it possible to tune in? Is it possible to tune in? And the answer is it is possible to tune in, but you've got to be ready and able to tune in. So let's talk about the topic of how do you tune in, okay? Before I do that, I want to give you an example from this book, Napoleon Hill. It's in the section on imagination. Let me turn to that, and I think it was on page 12 of Imagination. And this is an interesting story that Napoleon Hill tells. This is pretty short, so let me just go through this with you real quick. And he talks about Armistice Day in 1918. Now, this is November 11th, 1918. If you're not familiar with your history all that well, that was the day that World War I ended. There was a treaty of some sort that was signed, and so the war ended. So listen to this story, okay? And remember the time frame, 1918. This is before internet and TV and radio was commercially available. This is before Twitter and all this kind of stuff. This is in an era when something happened in a world environment. It would take days, usually, at the very soonest hours, usually days or even weeks sometimes, to get news and information. So think about that and keep that in mind as you hear this story. He says, on Armistice Day 1918, we have evidence in abundance to prove the reality of this principle of telepathy on such a scale as the world has never before witnessed. I remember distinctly the impression made on my mind on that eventful day. So strong was this impression that it awakened me at about 3 o'clock in the morning, just as effectively as if someone had aroused me by physical force. As I sat up in bed, I knew that something out of the ordinary had happened. So strange and so impelling was the effect of this experience that I got up, dressed myself, and went out into the streets of Chicago, where I was met by thousands of other people who felt the touch of the same influence. Everyone was asking, what happened? Well, what had happened was this. Millions of men had received instructions to cease fighting, and their combined joy set into motion a thought wave that swept the entire world and made itself felt in every normal mind that was capable of registering this thought wave. Perhaps never in the history of the world have so many millions of people thought the same thing in the same manner at the same time. For once in the history of the world, everybody felt something in common, and this effect of this harmonized thought was worldwide mob psychology that we witnessed on Armistice Day. So, interesting point there. I think we probably lost our ability to experience something like that simply by flipping on the television. But nevertheless, let's go through this topic now of how do you tune in. And the first way that you tune in is that you have to, this is a preface here. You got to just kind of take my way of looking at things and understand that I've got my own set of experiences and beliefs, and I'm the one giving the call, so you kind of have to take my way of looking at things. But here's what I think. The first thing is you've got to be clean and pure. And you say, well, that sounds kind of religious, and maybe it is kind of religious, but think about it for a minute. Think about all the things. You know, I've got this theory that says that nature wants to destroy everything that's good, and the force of nature is always going to be to take things from a state of order to a state of disorder. It's going to create chaos out of order. That's what nature does. When you plant your crops in the spring, the bugs and the heat are going to try to kill them during the summer. It's just inevitable. And the entire process of living on Earth and trying to be productive is to use energy and force and labor and work to overcome the natural, destructive, entropic forces that nature uses to try to force things into chaos and into disorder. Okay, now maybe you believe that, maybe you don't. I think that's true. But here's the point. In order to tune in, you've got to force order, and you've got to decrease chaos and disorder. And anytime you start to introduce drugs, addictions, stresses, money problems, self-centeredness, any of these kinds of issues, you're going to lose your ability to tune in. Now, I was talking to a guy, speaking of Alcoholics Anonymous, I was talking to a guy just yesterday. I've known this guy for probably 5 or 6 years, maybe longer. And he's a guy that has a lot of energy and is very good at what he does, but he's unfortunately struggled with a lot of addictions, including drugs, alcohol, gambling, sexual addictions, just you name it, he's been involved in it. And he's finally decided to get himself together. He started attending AA. He's been able to free himself of some of those addictions over the last several months. And I was talking to him yesterday, and it was interesting the word that he used. He said, for the first time in my life that I can remember, he says, I feel totally, totally free, and I feel pure, and I feel focused. And I thought, wow, interesting words. Now, this is a guy who can now have the opportunity to tune in and to receive inspiration so that he can make better decisions in his life. That's the first thing, is to have a clean, pure mind. The second thing is to set aside some time. You got to set aside some time. There's an ancient verse that says to go into your closet. And going into your closet is simply saying to pray or ponder or think, however you want to look at that. Again, I don't think we need to have a strong religious context here to distill the principle, which is true regardless of how you want to frame it religiously, which is you need to take some time and you need to set it aside. You need to have some solitude. You need to think, ponder, if you want to call it praying, if you want to talk to God or yourself, whatever you want to do. But this is something you can do to foster tuning in, okay? And then it says when you go into your closet, specifically it says close the door, solitude. Next, so number one, clean, pure mind. Number two, set aside time, think, ponder, pray. Next, rest. In my experience, resting is when a lot of ideas pop. I actually get ideas as I'm dreaming sometimes even. But here's the point, is not to dream and try to think of something while you're dreaming. That's a little bit hard to control. Here's what's a little bit easier to control. Resting. My experience is very clear that a tired mind rarely creates anything useful. Rarely creates anything useful. Think about the times when you've been trying to work, sitting at your desk, whatever, and you're just exhausted, either mentally or physically. You stayed up too late, or you've been working too hard and your muscles are tired. Whatever kind of tired you want to define. It just doesn't work. So allow yourself adequate rest. We don't want to make rest an objective, like Jim Rohn has said in the past. We want to make it a necessity. So do allow adequate rest, and you may want to start to find ways to schedule solitude time when you know your mind is going to be fresh. Maybe first thing in the morning. Some people are night owls and they work better at night. It doesn't really matter, but just find a time and take advantage of it. Here's what I found. If you jump into your routine first thing in the morning with email and phone calls and working on projects, you're really robbing yourself of some of your most creative time. My advice is go to bed a little bit earlier so you can get up a little earlier, and you can have some of that time to really ground yourself before you get started. Or if you like to work on the opposite end of the spectrum, maybe you can set some time aside later in the night. Doesn't matter. Next, number four, make a mastermind with other people and have an opportunity to discuss things with people. Now, this is one of the things that they talk about in Alcoholics Anonymous, and I certainly don't want to pretend to be an expert on how AA works. I've not personally been through that program or had problems with alcohol, and I'm sure that there are those of you on this call that have had a lot of experience with that, either personally or with people that you love. So please don't be offended by me talking about it. I know it's a sensitive topic when I'm not an expert on it, but I did find it interesting as I listened to this book on habits, and they talk about the importance of being involved in a group. And from what I understand in Alcoholics Anonymous, for the first 90 days of the program, you are supposed to attend 90 meetings, one per day. And those meetings are to put you in a group environment so that you can talk with other people and share other people's experience. But then that leads us to the next thing, which is belief. And this was a very strong conclusion that was drawn in this book on habits. He said and it gave a lot of different ideas of how to interrupt habits and replace them. And I won't go into the details because it's not relevant to this call, but here's what is relevant. They said all of that is good, but none of it will work if you don't have a belief. If you don't believe that it'll work, and in Alcoholics Anonymous, they said if you don't believe in a higher power, and they said something like 7 out of the 12 steps focus in on something to do with a higher power. But they talked about this idea of getting with somebody, even a group of one other person, 2 people total, 3 or 4 or 5, whatever it is, but get with a group so that you can come up with some ideas. This is a good way to receive inspiration. You can get your mind closely in tuned if you go back to the Napoleon Hill stuff we talked about earlier, and we've all experienced this. You put people in a group, you put people together, and you connect, not just on a communication, face-to-face talking, word-to-word basis, but there's a mind connection that's real. And my experience is if we can take people and put them in close proximity and on a regular basis, and there's harmony in that group, these people like each other, they don't have grudges, problems, whatever, then this type of information can really flow. Now, as regarding the topic of belief, first of all, you've got to give yourself permission to believe. If you don't believe that you're going to receive ideas, very rarely do ideas just pop into your mind randomly without trying to tune in, without taking proactive steps to become tuned in. And my experience is very clear, is that lack of belief is a huge creativity killer. Okay? You've heard the old saying, whether you believe you're right, whether you believe it or not, you're right. I think that's probably true. I remember one time a guy walked into my office. This is back in the days when we were doing recruiting for our business and trying to find people that wanted to be trained as consultants. And that turned out to be a very difficult scenario. And I see Rich Rocco is on this call as one of our consultants from the old days. And so, Rich, you've seen some of this stuff in days gone by. But here's what was interesting. It was very hard to get people to come into this business, to become a marketing consultant and to be successful with it, because what we found was they had limiting beliefs. Their belief about what was possible was completely shutting down the opportunities that would get them where they really wished that they could go, but didn't really have any belief. And this one particular guy walked in, and we used to talk to people about, hey, you can make $300,000 to $700,000 a year as a marketing consultant. And people would say, well, is that really true? And I remember one guy walked in for sure, and he said, walked in specifically, and he said, I don't believe that's true, that you can make $300,000 to $700,000 a year as a marketing consultant. And I said, well, why is that true? And he said, well, think about it. If you had clients paying you $3,000 a month, you'd have to have 10 clients just to make $360,000 a year. And I went, yeah, well, that's in that range. He says, but you couldn't do that. Given the fact that you work primarily with small businesses, the math just doesn't add up. It's just not possible. I don't see that you can do that. And I looked at him, and the very first thing I asked him, I said, well, let me ask you this. How much money do you make right now? And he says, what does that have to do with anything? I said, it has to do with everything. How much? And he said, well, and he just kind of hemmed and hawed. And I looked at him, and I said, look, if we're going to have a discussion, we got to have a discussion. How much money do you make? Well, it varies from year to year. I said, well, how much did you make last year? $125,000. And I went, okay, there's the problem. He goes, well, what do you mean? I said, well, there's nothing inherently right or wrong about making $125,000 a year. That's commendable. My screen just went off. Let me make sure it's still broadcasting here. I said, it's commendable how much you made. It doesn't really matter how much you made. What matters is this. If you're 45 years old and you've worked your whole life and you've worked hard and you've been an earnest worker and you've done your best, and you've tried and put effort and all that kind of stuff, and the most you've been able to make is $125,000, then your belief system is stuck at $125,000, and you can't see the things that are going to allow you to get past that point. Now, see, that conversation is true for any number, right? It doesn't matter that it was 125. It could have easily been 500,000 or 50,000 or 50 million a year. It doesn't matter what the number is. It matters the concept and the principle of belief. And this guy did not have any belief. And I'm telling you that if you don't believe that you can be inspired, if you don't believe that there's information that can come to you that can be helpful to you, it's very likely simply not going to happen. So I want to give you belief that your belief can grow and that you can get ideas. So let's wrap that discussion up and let's move on. That was a discussion of inspiration. And just by way of review, if you're making notes, I gave you 5 different ways to become tuned in. The first one is have a clean, pure mind. Number 2, set aside time to think, ponder, pray. Number 3, allow for adequate rest. Number 4, create a mastermind, an alliance with other people. And number 5 was give yourself permission to believe, okay? So let's move on to the second type of creativity, which is deduction. Deduction, getting one idea from another existing idea. This is why we have a program like the MYM Insider. That's why you're on this call. That's why you get on the Tuesday morning ad clinics and the strategic and tactical marketing calls, is because they're there to act as a sort of capital to give you ideas. It's pretty unlikely that I'm going to give you a specific idea that's going to specifically relate to your specific situation, your specific business. It's probably not going to happen. But what is going to happen is you're going to get ideas that you're going to be able to emulate and push into something else. So think about this MYM Insider program. I would like to encourage you to participate as much as you can, either live or on the back end. Obviously, those of you who are hearing me are already participating. But I would encourage you to do even more. Here's the second way to get ideas that you can transform one idea into another. And it's the simplest thing in the world, and probably you're pretty good at this, but I want to just put it out there, is to read, and read a lot. Here's a good question. I remember Jim Rohn used to ask this question. He says, how many books have you read? How about in the last month? How about in the last year? Do you allow yourself to be exposed to new ideas? Now, the reason that books are so good, you say, well, I don't have to read books to get good ideas. I can just talk to people. Here's what's good about books. Think about the nature of what a book is and what it represents. Somebody could have a lifetime of study on a particular subject and have taken the time to weave that lifetime of effort into a story or a narrative that allows you to very quickly, within a few hours' time, to absorb a lifetime of their experience. That's powerful. It's like concentrated stuff. You know, think about something that's concentrated, like a liquid cleaner or something, and you have to dilute it to 100 parts. This is concentrated ideas and effort. And as you read books, I would strongly encourage you to take notes. Okay, so there's one thing. Magazines are good also. If you've got some industry magazines or certain topics that you're interested in, I read. I like to run, and I read Runner's World magazine. Well, why? Well, because there's interesting ideas on how to run better. You say, well, why does it matter how well you run? It doesn't matter. It only matters what's important to you. If it's important to you to be a good parent, you probably ought to read parenting books. If you got a struggle with one of your kids, you probably ought to read books on what to do and with struggling kids. If you've got a business that's not working, you might want to read some books on that and so forth, okay? So, like I said earlier, life is trying to take order and break it into disorder. Newton's first law of motion says that every body remains in a state of rest or uniform motion unless it is acted upon by an external unbalanced force. Think about that for a second. Every body remains in a state of uniform motion or rest unless it is acted on by an external unbalanced force. It's your job to apply an external unbalanced force to your life to learn things, to become better, to become stronger, okay? You have to add energy to the system to make it work. So number 3, so 1, MYM Insider, that's great for you in the business context. 2, read. 3, this is the most important one. Just pay attention. Pay stinking attention, man. Pay attention to what? Well, from a marketing and advertising perspective, which is the nature of this particular event and series that you're participating in, MYM Insider, read ads. Listen to the radio. Listen to the ads. Listen to the TV. Get the newspaper out. Look at your mail and sort it and look at the ads and see if you can find anything that's worthwhile. And a lot of times we talk about, oh, you know, so much marketing and advertising is bad. Well, that's good. Find it and dissect why is it bad? How could it be done better? And then next, look for stuff that is good. And you know what? You're going to find it. You can do the next idea I have for you is to create a journal or a diary or a scrapbook of things so that you can review it when you need an idea. I wrote an ad, and I want to share this ad with you. A couple years ago, I wrote this ad for a chiropractor that did a lot of things, but one of the things that she specialized in was weight loss. And she had several different disciplines that she used in helping people lose weight. It wasn't like you go in and get your back adjusted and you lose weight. There was other things involved, and it's not important what things were involved. But here's what's interesting. I wrote an ad for her, and it was written to be sort of a radio ad. So this is a little bit long. You might need to cut this down, but listen to this ad and see what you think, okay? And so here's what we're trying to do. I want to have a female voice reading this ad. I want them to be an average-sounding, 40-something-year-old sounding woman, somebody that sounds a little bit tired, a little bit laconic, a little bit defeated, but not depressed, just sort of resigned to things not being good. Does that make sense? And here's what I want the copy to say. Okay, ready? Pretend like I'm an average 40-something-year-old woman who's a little bit tired and defeated. Here's the ad. Fat. Gotta hate that. Being fat. Just the word sounds awful. Fat. There's the obvious stuff you hate about being fat, like not fitting into clothes, like being tired all the time, and of course, all the health problems that are caused by being fat. Then there's the subtle things that make fat just plain miserable, like small children who don't understand polite rules and call you the name that adults won't. Fat. Like being sure that everybody's looking at you and thinking, ooh, there's the fat lady. Like hating all the skinny salad eaters and getting excited when somebody more fat than you walks into the room. You hate that you feel that way, but you do. That's just how fat works. Then there's the bad feelings you have towards people who used to be fat but somehow lost the weight. You hate that you secretly hope that they'll gain it back like you have every time you've tried. You hate it even worse when they actually do keep it off. TV shows like Biggest Loser just depress you more than they inspire you. You say, that's not fair. They get to be at the ranch with personal trainers with nothing to do but eat salads and work out all day. But you keep watching anyway, dreaming, hoping that someday, somehow, you can get rid of fat. Gastric bypass, lap band surgery, they just depress you. You volunteer for that surgery in a second, but who's got that kind of money? And finally, deep down inside, you know that fat is going to win. Again, no flimsy New Year's resolution can fix fat. And then we change the voice to Dr. Shirley, who says, hi, I'm Dr. Shirley Refrano. I specialize in working with women who feel like they've been defeated by fat. You know as well as I do that fat isn't so much about the particular number of pounds. It's a state of mind. A woman who is 30 pounds overweight has many of the same frustrations and feelings as a woman who's 100 pounds overweight. I can help you either way. My approach is a doctor-supervised one-on-one solution. I work with patients individually to help them detoxify, change their beliefs, alter their habits, and take back control of their lives. Most of the 1,000-plus women I've worked with are between 25 and 150 pounds overweight and have tried, quote, everything. I can help you too, and it will not cost you a fortune. Call me today for a free confidential consultation, and I'll explain how the program works. I'll let you decide if you think it might be a good fit for you. I won't bore you with a bunch of case studies. I have plenty of them in my files, but You already know that other people can lose weight. This is not about them. It's about you. Even if you feel like this is a last-ditch effort, please give me a call. Here's my phone number, and then the phone number is given. Now, from a lot of different levels, this is a really good ad. It's really good because it takes the person and it vocalizes how they feel. It takes the reticular activator dialogue that's constantly on the radar of these people, and it makes them vocalized. I think it just hits the nail right on the head. And then when she comes in and says, hey, there's a solution, it might work for you. Hey, we've got case studies, but you don't need case studies because you know other people can lose weight. We're just hitting all of the hot buttons. It's just such a great bullseye reticular activator. So I wrote this ad, and I thought, oh, this is pretty good. Then, funny enough, I realized, you know what? This ad, I didn't even realize it at the time, but this ad came right from another ad that I had clipped out. I'm a clipper of ads, and I think I have this ad that I can put on the screen. Let me see here. No, that's not it. Let me see. Yeah, here it is. This is an ad that appeared in a magazine. I clipped it out. It's for Nicorette. Okay? That should be on your screen now. It is a full double truck ad. It says 2010 is going to suck. Quitting sucks, but if that's your resolution, Nicorette doubles your chances of success. So let's read this ad together. Dear smokers, 2010 is going to suck. If you're one of the millions of smokers who made quitting your New Year's resolution, then you're in for a tough start to 2010. There's just no way around it. Quitting sucks. In fact, it's one of the hardest things you'll ever do in life. It doesn't matter how old you are, how long you've been smoking, or how many times you've tried before. Quitting is difficult for everybody. Of course, it would be great if we could somehow make quitting a walk in the park. Unfortunately, we'd be lying if we said using Nicorette will stop it from sucking completely. But we can promise you this. We can make quitting suck a whole lot less. In fact, that's our resolution for this year. You quit, and we'll make it suck less. When you drink your morning cup of Joe, situation. Think about it. This is a great ad here. When you drink your morning cup of Joe, think to yourself, wow, not having a cigarette right now sucks. We'll be there. When you go out for drinks with your friends and they leave you to go out for a smoke, we'll be sitting alone at the bar. We'll make sitting alone at the bar slightly more tolerable. And when you're about to go to enjoy your post-dessert smoke after a great meal, we'll give you the strength to put the cigarettes down. So welcome to a sucky new year, and an exciting new one too. If you keep to the Nicorette Sucks Less program and chew 9 to 12 pieces of Nicorette a day to manage your cravings, you'll be giving yourself the best shot at success. In fact, Nicorette actually doubles your chances of being fully smoke-free. Then, after you're done quitting, you can move on to your other resolution, like cleaning your DVR or hanging out with the in-laws. And no, we can't make either of those things suck any less. Sincerely, Nicorette. Now, I think this is a great ad. That's why I clipped it. But see, you're never going to clip this ad if you don't look for this ad. You know, they say in the scriptures that finding is strictly reserved for seekers. And if you don't seek, you will not find. And I took this ad, I clipped it out, and I didn't even really think about it, but less than a week later, I wrote another ad, different situation, similar tone, not the same, but I took that tone. So that was called Deduction, getting an existing idea to move into a new idea. In fact, if you were on the Tuesday morning ad clinic with me just 2 days ago, you heard me do this. I was talking to Jim Story about his request for referrals that he was putting out to his clients, and I said, hey, did you see that Pawn Stars episode where the guy brought in the original copy of Rolling Stone magazine, and they had at the back of the magazine a place where they were trying to get subscriptions, and it was $5 for 6 months and $10 for a year, something like that. And then they had something you could fill out that said, no thanks, I think your magazine sucks. And if so, you could write in what you thought and tell them. And I said to Jim, I said, look, this is not exactly like that, but what if we put a request for referrals, not subscriptions, but referrals that said, let's ask people what they thought about our service. And we give them just 3 checkboxes. Number 1, I love your service and would recommend it, but I just can't think of anyone right now. Number 2, I love your service and I would recommend somebody, and here's their names and phone numbers. And number 3, I don't think you're doing a very good job and I wouldn't recommend you anyway. And here's any comments I have about that. And you say, well, that's so different. How do you take a Rolling Stone magazine ad for subscriptions from the show Pawn Stars you're watching and turn it into a marketing piece? And the answer is, I don't know. You've just got to cram it all in there and let it percolate so that when you go to think about it, these things can be fresh and they can be available and you can use them. If you don't, you won't get the answer, okay? So emulate things that you find. Go to the marketing toolkit on our website in the insider section and open up the ad library, and we're working on making that a little bit more user-friendly, but it frustrates people sometimes. They say, well, it's not very user-friendly. Well, who cares if it's user-friendly? Just go open up 2, 3, 4 ads a day and just read them. Print them out. Make a binder of them. Look at them. Let them sink in. There's some really good stuff in that, okay? So let's move on to the last thing here. We've had 2 sections that we've talked about, inspiration and deduction, ways to get creative ideas. Let's go to the third one, which was probably my favorite, which is mismatching. And this is sort of an out-of-the-box thinking, training your mind to think crazy thoughts. You say, well, why would I want a crazy thought? And the answer is because a lot of the best solutions come out of the crazies, okay? And some ways that you can give yourself some crazy stimulation is, one of the things that I used to do a lot when I was younger, still do this to an extent, but I used to a lot when I was younger, is listen to some of the comedians. Listen to some of the comedians, because the comedians, their job is to make you look at common things in an uncommon way. This is a very, very useful skill that you can develop for you. I mean, think about Jerry Seinfeld. His entire career was based on what's called observational comedy, is looking at things that are normal and trying to figure out what's ridiculous about them. Just to be silly, I'll give you a couple of ideas and suggestions, okay? I remember when I was in school, the teacher would say, in what year did Columbus sail the ocean blue? And the answer, of course, it's a little rhyme. Columbus sailed the ocean blue in the year 1492. And it helps you remember that. And when the teacher asked me that, I would raise my hand and say, well, which voyage? And she would say, you're so stupid, I can't stand you. And I always had a comeback, and I always had a smart alecky answer for everything, which isn't necessarily helpful. I did spend my fair share of time in the principal's office and time out of recess and things like that. But the process of thinking a little bit different and not taking things necessarily at face value is very, very important. Think about what we do in marketing. We've got a marketing equation that says interrupt, engage, educate, and offer. And the first step there is to interrupt. And if you can teach yourself to interrupt by thinking below the surface, then you will start to write things that are not surface level things, which are going to be more interesting. I was trying to teach my son, who's 14 the other day, how to teach a lesson. He goes, what do you mean how to teach a lesson? Because in the church that we go to, they ask the people that go to the church to teach the lessons. There's no paid clergy. So everybody's a volunteer. They'll ask you to volunteer, and then you have to either teach lessons or you have to give a talk in the main service. And he's got to give a talk in church a week from this Sunday. And so he's a little bit nervous about that at age 14. And I said, if you want to give a good talk, the first thing you got to do is you got to get under the surface level, because everybody's already heard the surface level 50 times and they just tune out. So if you want to give a good talk, you've got to get under the surface level. Some people will try to break the ice, so to speak, by telling a joke, which is a good technique. I said, but if you get past the joke and then you just get into the normal stuff, people are going to tune you out. And if people tune you out, then what's the point? There's no point in giving a talk or a speech or a lesson that people just tune out. So you've got to get a little bit underneath the surface. So getting under the surface. So this is just for fun. This is just some stupid stuff. You don't have to pay that close attention here. But, this is one I do all the time. My wife hates it. She punches me in the ribs when I say this. But they'll always ask you when you go to check out at the store. They say, is that everything? And I always look at them and say, no, it's not everything. This is only the things that I want. How would I possibly fit everything into this cart? And that's when I get punched in the ribs. Why do they call it a building? When it's done, shouldn't it be called a built? Why do they call them apartments when they're all stuck together? If monkeys and apes, if man evolved from monkeys and apes, why do we still have monkeys and apes? This is my favorite. Why do they put Braille on the drive-up ATM machines? In fact, why did they put Braille anywhere that's in public? How people find the sign to be able to read the Braille? I don't know. How does the bus driver close the door after he gets off the bus? Before we had sliced bread, what was the best thing? Let's see what else I got here. Just a couple more. If the number 2 pencil is the most popular, why is it only number 2? If you try to fail and you succeed at it, which have you done? Where do forest rangers go to get away from it all? What do people in China call their good plates? Why isn't the word phonetic spelled the way it sounds? Why are there flotation devices in planes instead of parachutes? Why do they have locks on the doors at 7-Eleven? And then here's another one that is interesting. Why do they ask at the airports if anyone has put something in your bag without your knowledge? How would you even know that? So just kind of thinking below the surface is the name of the game here. I'm going to encourage you to do it. If you would get into watching comedy a little bit, some of it's raunchy and not really fit to be watched, and you just have to make your own judgment call there, but it is good. I don't know if this is even on TV still, but you might want to catch an episode of Mystery Science Theater 3000. This is a show where they watch old stupid movies and then they sit there and comment and make sarcastic comments about the movies. But it's a good exercise in seeing things in a little bit different way. Okay. Now the next thing I'm going to do is give yourself permission to think stupid thoughts. Okay. In a brainstorming session, in a group setting, if you go through and you're trying to think things up, allow yourself to get a little bit crazy and think some stupid things up. Sometimes the stupidest stuff is the stuff that's actually going to make the biggest difference. But if you cut yourself off from thinking that stuff in the first place because it's too stupid, then it's just not going to work. That's where this ad that I had on the screen earlier came into place, was the $65,000 brain surgery. Now, I thought this ad up in reaction to talking to a window guy who was very frustrated by $189 window sellers. He says they were selling windows for $650. He says, man, they sell these windows for $189. They're the biggest pieces of junk. But when we go tell people they're pieces of junk, it's just hard to communicate that in a way that's believable. So I wrote this ad, $65,000 brain surgery, now only $18,900. Now, this is an extreme example of a outside of the box thought, but look at it for a second. First of all, notice the numbers. They were selling $650 windows against $189 windows. Do you see the similarities there in the price? Almost as good as the original, minimal sacrifice required. If you can't afford full-price brain surgery, you no longer have to go without. Thanks to our innovative no-frills approach, brain surgery is now available to anyone on any budget and without sacrificing quality. Here's how we do it. And this is being sarcastic, going after the low-price sellers. So the first thing says no expensive doctors. MDs have to go through years of medical school and residency. That costs a lot of money. We use what we call near docs, who are people who wanted to go to medical school but either couldn't afford it or weren't disciplined enough to hack it. We require all near docs to watch at least 100 episodes of realistic network television medical dramas. Next, no expensive insurance. Ever since that lady spilled coffee on herself at McDonald's drive-thru and won the lawsuit, we cut out malpractice insurance. Everyone knows that we live in a lawsuit-happy country, and doctors are often the target. Malpractice insurance is expensive, and most doctors admit they only carry it, quote-unquote, because the law requires it, which is pretty funny. No expensive hospitals. Who could blame you for wanting to avoid the high cost of hospitals? They want something like $900 a day for a little shared room. And with most brain operations requiring at least 10 days in the hospital, you can see where a lot of your money is going. Our facility is conveniently located at the Stack and Store mini stores just off Highway 79 on Pool Road. We occupy 2 air-conditioned units, 1718, for your comfort. Now, what we're doing is we're showing how ridiculous it is to charge such a low price for something that should cost much more. Next, no expensive anesthesia. Mothers are always talking about how nothing even comes close to childbirth pains. Just wait till you come to have brain surgery with us. You'll be able to one-up any mother, even the Octomom, after our drug-free, all-natural procedure. We recommend 2 to 4 Advil 1 hour before the surgery, not included, and 2 more every hour for 2 weeks afterward, not included. Next, no expensive rehabilitation. The hidden cost of many brain surgeries is the expensive rehabilitation that often drags on for months. Our system is much easier, faster, and cheaper. We start our patients off watching DVD box sets of Simpsons, not included. Then after 3 weeks, graduating to Family Guy, not included. Full recovery normally takes 3 to 10 years. Don't worry, it's just your brain. Go for it. And then on the side, he's got the doctor. I'm not a doctor, but I watched a lot of ER and House on TV. Now using the Miracle Blade 3 as seen on TV, maybe you should think twice before calling the $189 window companies too. You get what you pay for. And then we've got the fine print at the very bottom. This is not an actual ad for brain surgery. It is a joke. Hopefully nobody would ever think that somebody would use a Miracle Blade 3 for brain surgery when clearly the original Ginsu is the preferred choice of near docs everywhere. This is actually an ad for replacement windows, hopefully an effective attempt to get you to realize that those guys who are selling $189 windows have about as much credibility as the mini storage brain surgeons. See, this is interesting. So think through this stuff. I wrote an ad in I think about 2009 or 10 that took a similar type of approach. It's an offensive ad that is actually not that offensive. And this was for our plastic surgeon client. He said, you know what, the recession is killing me. People are not buying plastic surgery. This is a guy that did breast augmentation and tummy tucks and liposuction and stuff like that. And he was just getting killed. And he said even discounting doesn't make any difference. He says we can come in and offer a really good price, but we just can't break through to people. And I said, well, if you want to break through to people, let's break through to people. So we wrote this ad. The ad goes like this. Buy one boob, get one free. That's right, buy one boob, get one free. Let's face it, times are tough. The economy is down, and if you think the economy has hit you hard, try being a plastic surgeon. When times are tough, people still buy food. They still put gas in their car, and they may even splurge on a big screen TV. But breast augmentation, well, breast augmentation falls way down the priority list. Even here at VCPS with Dr. Desmond, one of the area's leading plastic surgeons who's performed over 3,000 breast augmentations, 2,000 liposuction procedures, and hundreds of tummy tucks, our patient load has decreased significantly since the recession hit. The fall off benefits you. If you've been thinking about breast augmentation or any kind of plastic surgery, we want to offer you a considerable discount. Admittedly, it sounds weird to say buy one boob, get one free, and some women might even be offended by me saying it so flippantly. But in fact, that's exactly what our discount is. When you purchase one implant, we'll give you the second one absolutely free. If you don't need breast augmentation, we have similar discounts on other procedures. To be honest, we're not sure how this promotion will work. We're trying to get business up. We're not trying to swamp it. Some people might like this. Some people might think we're crazy, be offended, and vow never to do business with us. But if buy one boob, get one free seems like a reasonable offer to you, then give us a call. I'm not saying run that ad. I'm saying this is an ad that you can think of when you get a little bit more creative and you allow yourself to mismatch, think outside the box, be inspired, deduction, etc. This is all good stuff, okay? I'll end this call with one more. We were looking yesterday, me and Ben Lane, one of my consultants here, we're looking at a website content, and he said, you know, I'm just kind of struggling putting this one together. I mean, it happens to all of us. You look at something for long enough and you just kind of, you can't figure it out, and you end up writing stuff that you don't like that much. And that's what he had done, and it had some sort of platitude type stuff on it, and it showed a guy with his family, and this guy was old. He was in his 80s, and he had some other younger people, and it was obvious that this was a remodeling company that was a family business started by this old guy, and it was he'd been around since 1955, literally 1955. This company had been in business, and it talked about integrity and we'll do what we say we do, and old-fashioned values. And I looked at the website. I said, you know, it's just not very interesting. It's not very believable. So we rewrote it, and just getting a little bit outside of the box and embracing this idea that we're old and we're a little bit outdated instead of shirking it. And here's what I came up with. And I don't know the guy's name, and I apologize if you're on the call and this is your company and I made this name up. I named him Heber. I don't know if that's true. The company's Brighton. So I named the guy Heber. I'm sure he's got another name, and Ben will find out what it is, and we'll plug it in there. Maybe it's Henry or Dave or whatever. But anyway, Heber Brighton started this company in 1955 when people were honest, did what they say they do, and a man's word was his bond. For us, nothing's changed. Delivers a different punch. And then a subheadline. Integrity beyond reproach means you'll never, ever have to worry about your project. Next subheadline. If you want stress-free, total peace of mind remodeling, you've come to the right place. And then we tell a little story. When my father, Heber Brighton, started this company in 1955, he was, anyway, I can't even read my own writing, but it just tells a little story there. And it talks about, as we get down here, let's see. That means we literally treat our customers like family. If there's a problem, we'll fix it. If you need something, we'll sell it to you at a fair price. But if you don't need something, we won't sell it to you. Okay. Then we put on here what's called the Brighton Treat You Like Family Articles of Faith. Here's how we operate. Profit is good, but you never try to retire from remodeling your mother's kitchen. All costs fully disclose in writing up front before the job, no surprises. If a problem pops up, open and honest discussion of the nature and scope of the problem and a solution. Take full credit when you do a good job, admit it when you didn't do it right. If mama ain't happy, the customer, then ain't nobody happy. It just kind of running with that. We take the philosophy and the identity of the company, and we have a better ability to make it interesting and palatable. So that's what I got for you today. By way of review, we've got inspiration, we've got deduction, and we've got mismatching. So take that, maybe go back, listen to this call again a little bit later, and hopefully you can come up with some ideas that will work for you. The key, though, for inspiration is to be clean and pure, to take some time, and to believe that inspiration is available. For deduction, the key is to expose yourself to good ideas so that they can work for you. So you've got a storehouse so they can work as capital so that you can grow them like an investment. And mismatching is just about thinking different and being a little bit crazy and allowing yourself to go a little bit wild and not being afraid to experiment with buy one boob, get one free, and letting it offend you, but then looking beyond the offense and saying, well, how could we use that? How could we work that? And maybe the answer is you can't, but if you don't have the idea, you don't even have an opportunity to put it to the test. So that's what I've got for you today. I'll be back in about 25 minutes for our Insiders Open Forum. We're going to talk about the concepts and questions that you have. And so I'll talk to you guys then. Thanks so much. Talk to you in a few minutes. Bye-bye.